This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Many children first learn the value of money by receiving an allowance. The purpose is to let children learn from experience at an age when financial mistakes are not very costly. The amount of money that parents give to their children to spend as they wish differs from family to family. Timing is another consideration. Some children get a weekly allowance. Others get a monthly allowance. In any case, parents should make clear what, if anything, the child is expected to pay for with the money. At first, young children may spend all of their allowance soon after they receive it. If they do this, they will learn the hard way that spending must be done within a budget. Parents are usually advised not to offer more money until the next allowance. The object is to show young people that a budget demands choices between spending and saving. Older children may be responsible enough to save money for larger costs, like clothing or electronics. Many people who have written on the subject of allowances say it is not a good idea to pay your child for work around the home. These jobs are a normal part of family life. Paying children to do extra work around the house, however, can be useful. It can even provide an understanding of how a business works. Allowances give children a chance to experience the things they can do with money. They can share it in the form of gifts or giving to a good cause. They can spend it by buying things they want. Or they can save and maybe even invest it. Saving helps children understand that costly goals require sacrifice. You have to cut costs and plan for the future. Requiring children to save part of their allowance can also open the door to future saving and investing. Many banks offer services to help children and teenagers learn about personal finance. A savings account is an excellent way to learn about the power of compound interest. Compounding works by paying interest on interest. So, for example, $1 invested at 2% interest for 2 years will earn 2 cents in the first year. The second year, the money will earn 2% of $1.02, and so on. That may not seem like a lot, but over time, it adds up. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can learn more about economics with MP3s and transcripts of our programs at voaspecialenglish.com. And you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Economics Report. Microfinance is a fast-growing part of the financial industry in many developing countries. Micro-lenders give small loans to poor people to start or expand businesses. Microcredit offers a chance to improve lives and reduce poverty. But officials in Andhra Pradesh in southern India are investigating whether debt collections are linked to a series of suicides among borrowers. Reddy Subramaniam is a rural development official in that state. He says many of these deaths happened immediately after the recovery agents of the microfinance institutions either visited the house or did something insulting. Reports of corruption and abuses have led to emergency measures in Andhra Pradesh to ban some collection methods. These rules also aim to limit costly fees and high interest rates on loans. The Asian Development Bank says microfinance institutions in the Asia-Pacific area charge interest of 30 to 70% a year. Charges can be even higher when other costs are added. But micro-lenders also face higher operating costs compared to traditional lenders. Groups like the Asian Development Bank oppose limits on interest rates because of these high business costs. Economist Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006 for his work with microfinance. In the 1970s, he started what became the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. Grameen says it charges 20% for general loans, less for home and student loans. The poorest of the poor pay no interest. But enough microfinance borrowers are paying enough for their loans to create a profitable business. MF Transparency is an organization that works with microfinance lenders to make pricing policies more clear. The group is based in the United States. Chief Executive Chuck Waterfield says easy credit can lead some people to borrow more than they can repay. He says abuses affect only a small percentage of India's 50 million microfinance borrowers. India's biggest microfinance company is SKS Microfinance. In its latest budget year, it reported profits of 18%. SKS began selling stock on the Bombay Stock Exchange in August. New York University economist Jonathan Morduch says the microcredit industry is young and there are problems, but he says too much regulation could kill it. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Indonesia has one of the world's fastest growing economies, expanding at a rate of 6% this year. Technology is helping fuel that growth and producing a new generation of young entrepreneurs. One of these technopreneurs is Nadim Makaram. He graduated from the Harvard Business School in Boston, Massachusetts. He returned home and launched Gojek. This service connects motorcycle taxis, called Ojeks, with people who need a ride or a delivery. Gojek uses online maps, mobile phones, and a call center. The aim is to improve Jakarta's disorganized motorcycle taxi system. Nadim Makaram says everything depends on a business plan. I firmly believe that business and just straight up rational business growth, profitable business growth, and social impact are not mutually exclusive. Gojek recently won $10,000 in a competition through the American State Department's Global Entrepreneurship Program. Indonesia is one of 5 countries in this program, which links startup businesses with investors. Many startups are internet-based services. Indonesia already has more than 700 startups online, and new ones are launched every week. Half of Indonesians still live on less than $2 a day. But Indonesia has a young population interested in trying new technology. Right now, about 45 million Indonesians, or only about 1 in 5, use the internet. But about half of those people use mobile devices to go online, and those numbers are only growing. Some experts say the conditions for local entrepreneurs are the best in the world. Still, the World Bank currently ranks Indonesia 121st out of 183 economies in ease of doing business. The biggest barrier to entrepreneurs is a lack of financing. Also, economists say Indonesia needs more entrepreneurs. They now make up less than 1% of the workforce. The rate is over 7% in nearby Singapore and almost 12% in the United States. Indonesia's biggest bank, Bank Mandiri, expects to increase loans by as much as 25% this year. Demand is growing for credit, for small businesses, and for consumers. Leonard Theobrata helped start Whiteboard Journal. This online publication offers a place for young designers to show their products. He says Indonesia has a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs willing to take a risk. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. The Arab Spring in the Middle East and North Africa has raised hopes and dreams. But can it raise money to invest in a better future? How to respond to the Arab uprisings was a major question for world leaders at the Group of 8 meeting in France in late May. Earlier, the head of the World Bank said international support can speed progress, but only if coupled with real reform. President Obama discussed American development plans in his Middle East policy speech on May 19th. He said, "The goal must be a model in which protectionism gives way to openness. The reins of commerce pass from the few to the many, and the economy generates jobs for the young. America's support for democracy will therefore be based on ensuring financial stability, promoting reform, and integrating competitive markets with each other and the global economy. And we are going to start with Tunisia and Egypt." Democracy protests in those two countries forced out their presidents early this year. The World Bank will offer Egypt $4.5 billion in loans over the next 2 years. The money would be part of a plan with the International Monetary Fund to help control Egypt's budget deficit. The goal is to improve the country's credit rating in order to ease the concerns of investors and reduce borrowing costs. About $2 billion in loans would be linked to progress in government reforms. The World Bank also promised at least $1 billion for Tunisia. 20 years ago, the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development was created to help former communist countries after the fall of the Soviet Union. Now, that bank could invest up to $3.5 billion in the Middle East and North Africa. About 400 million people live in those two areas. A majority are under the age of 30. The anger of the many educated but unemployed young people has been a driving force in the Arab Spring movement. Oil is the main export for many of the countries. Yet a recent World Bank study showed that oil has not done much to raise wages. Income growth continues to fall behind East Asia and South America. Private investment has been limited largely to the oil industry. There are some efforts to change that. In March, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton promised $2 billion through a government agency known as OPIC, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. The economic situation in Italy is worrying investors and may have cost its prime minister his job. Like Greece, Italy is facing pressure to make unpopular cuts in government spending. Silvio Berlusconi sought to enact measures meant to satisfy his country's creditors. On early November 8th, Mr. Berlusconi won a budget vote in Italy's lower house of parliament. But the prime minister lost something else. A majority of lawmakers in the lower house refused to vote. It appeared Mr. Berlusconi had lost their support. He announced that he would resign after Parliament passed budget-cutting measures. Italian government debt is about 120% the size of the country's economy. That is second only to Greece in Europe. Greece, Ireland, and Portugal have all required rescue loans to help them pay creditors. But unlike those nations, Italy has the third largest economy using the euro, and it is among the 10 largest economies in the world. On November 7th, European finance ministers met in Brussels to discuss the deepening debt crisis among nations using the euro. European Union Economic and Monetary Affairs Commissioner Olli Rehn said Italy needed to enact reforms. It is essential now that Italy will stick to its fiscal targets, ensure their implementation, and intensify the structural reforms that can boost growth and job creation. Italy recently faced an increase in borrowing costs that topped 7%. Unlike Greece, Italy's budget deficit is not out of control. Of greatest concern, however, is Italy's lack of growth and job creation. Financial officials and market watchers are also concerned that Italy's debt problems may be too big to solve for the 17 nations using the euro. European leaders have yet to agree on the size and conditions of a rescue fund or plan. In Brussels, Dutch Finance Minister Jan Kees de Jager said the rescue fund needed to be bigger. But he said budget reform of euro nations was important too. We have to increase the capacity of the emergency fund. That's very important, but it's not the only thing. Economic reforms and budget cuts in countries currently under attack of the financial markets are at least as important than more money in the emergency fund. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Special English is VOA's daily source of news and information for people learning English. Go to voaspecialenglish.com for transcripts and MP3s of our stories and for the classroom, our e-learning platform. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Economics Report. Changes are taking place in Silicon Valley in California. Larry Page will replace Eric Schmidt as chief executive at Google. And Apple's chief, Steve Jobs, is taking another medical leave. 2 years ago, Mr. Jobs received a new liver. In 2004, he had pancreatic cancer. The latest announcement did not say how long he might be away or give a reason. Apple reported record-high earnings for the final 3 months of last year. But the health of Steve Jobs always brings questions about the future of the company. He helped start Apple Computer in 1976. Today, the company that played a big part in the personal computing revolution just calls itself Apple. Its products include the iPod and iPhone, and its latest success, the iPad tablet computer. Steve Jobs has long been Apple's public face, but some might forget that he left in 1985 to form a computer company called Next. Manuel Perez Quiñones is a computer science professor at Virginia Tech. He says Apple has led the development of some technologies, but that explains only part of its success. For example, he says many development tools associated today with Apple came from Next. Apple bought Next in 1996. Mr. Jobs rejoined Apple and became the permanent CEO in 2000. Last May, Apple passed Microsoft in market value and became the most valuable technology company in the world. Mr. Jobs says he will remain Chief Executive Officer and stay involved in major decisions during his medical leave. But he put Tim Cook, his Chief Operating Officer, in control of daily operations. As Steve Jobs steps back at Apple, Eric Schmidt is stepping down at Google. Mr. Schmidt plans to leave his CEO job in April after almost 10 years. He will remain on Google's board of directors. Larry Page was Google's founding CEO when he launched the company with Sergey Brin in 1998. But Mr. Schmidt has been the public face of Google, while Mr. Page has mainly worked on new products. Today, Google is the world leader in internet search and has products like the Android operating system for mobile devices. But Google is seen as trying to recapture the creative energy and speed of its early days. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. For more economic news, go to our website, voaspecialenglish.com. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Economics Report. President Obama announced an agreement with congressional Republicans in December. It would extend for 2 years the tax cuts put in place by former President George W. Bush. The tax cuts were to end in January. The compromise extends current income tax rates for all Americans for 2 years. That includes rates for the richest Americans. The agreement also cuts workers' Social Security taxes by 2 percentage points. Social Security is retirement insurance paid by almost all American workers and employers. The so-called payroll tax holiday would save a family earning $50,000 about $1,000 a year. For the president, the most important part of the compromise was the extension of aid payments to unemployed Americans for 13 months. In November, the jobless rate increased by 0.2% to 9.8%. Economists say payments to unemployed people directly help the economy because they spend the money immediately. This has led some experts to call the agreement a stimulus measure meant to improve the economy. President Obama said he accepted the compromise because he wanted to help unemployed Americans. But the president faced strong opposition from his own party. Some Democrats objected to keeping tax cuts for the rich at a time when the government is struggling with deep budget deficits. The extension of the tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans is expected to cost about $80 billion over 2 years. The deal also includes tax cuts aimed at middle-income Americans and businesses. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said Republicans support the deal. He said it was an important step to take for the American people. Before the agreement, Senate Republicans had threatened to block other measures unless the tax cuts for the richest Americans were extended. Some Democrats were disappointed that President Obama agreed to the compromise. In 2008, he campaigned on the promise that he would continue tax cuts for the middle class. But he proposed to raise income taxes on families reporting $250,000 or more in taxable income. Later in December, both houses of Congress passed the tax bill, and President Obama signed it into law. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.